Traders, how are you? With Marcello doing the recap of the markets this week. We have a very serious conversation to discuss this week, talking about the collapse of the dollar and the new vaccines that they're putting in food and pork. Let's get started. I said the V word. I hope I don't get banned again. So the biggest news of the week is this de-dollarization effect of what's happening around the world. This is a very serious problem because there's a situation where, according to Ray Dalio, of the last 16 times that we've had a change in the monetary system, 13 of those 16 times we've had war. Now, this kind of looks to me like a passage of the Titan. There's a little graph. I wanted to do a more in-depth video on this, but there's a situation where, and if you guys don't know how this works, the reason why the United States is the empire that it is because it had made agreement with Saudi Arabia to sell their oil in dollars. And then everybody started selling them in dollars. The deal was that they were going to protect Saudi Arabia. Obviously, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, the military was much more imposing compared to other militaries compared to now. But essentially, before, everybody used the dollar no matter what, meaning if Brazil wanted to pay Russia for something, they would go out, buy dollars, and then send the dollars to Russia rather than doing direct swaps. If, let's say, I don't know, France wanted to buy something from Bangladesh or France, same thing. They would go out, buy the dollars, and then they would send the dollars rather than doing their own currency. The reserve status of the dollar has gone down for about 72%. I can't remember the years off the top of my head, but now it's at about 59%, meaning that a lot more countries are not holding dollars as much anymore. This is a really big problem, and I'm going to give you a few examples. I want to do a more in-depth video on this, so let me know if you guys want me to do that. And I think they're doing it on purpose. Because in order for them to impose this wonderful, united World Economic Forum, you're going to own nothing and be happy, they need to destroy the United States and Europe, essentially, right? They need to destroy this idea of freedom so you can go and enjoy your crickets and not being able to go to a party on the weekend because you ate too much meat this week because it hurts the environment. They could just force this world government, communist government down our throats. So one more time, let me hit the button. So Saudi Arabia entered a trade alliance with China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 countries from the Central Asia to step away from the reliance of the dollar. France and China. France, which is somebody that should be our friend, right? France sold natural gas to China in yuan. So not even in euros, in yuan. And then China and Brazil are even going to settle their own currencies, ditching the US dollar. Now, remember that the BRICS countries, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now hold a bigger percentage of the global economy than the G7 countries. And they're even planning on creating a new reserve currency to get away from the dollar as well. Now, why does all of this matter? Well, according to a report from an office from the Federal Reserve, in 1993, 60% of all dollars in circulations are outside of the United States. I think that number is pretty accurate about now. The numbers that I found were between 40 and 70%. I think it's about 60, 70%. And what happens if all those dollars, which is 60, 70% of all the dollars in circulations, come back to the US? Meaning, if Russia and Brazil and all these countries aren't going out and buying dollars to pay for their stuff and they're just sending it back to the US, what's going to happen to the value of the dollar? What happens to a currency if it loses value? Or if there's a product on the shelves, right? Like Louis Vuitton, the reason why it costs so much is because of the shortages, right? Diamonds as well, Rolexes, that's how the market works. So if there's too much of a product, what happens to the price? It generally drops because there's just too many of them, right? So that means that when all these dollars come back to the United States, that we're going to have a huge collapse in the dollar. and it's going to start slowly, and then we're going to walk into hyperinflation. This is a really big problem because it doesn't seem to be slowing down, and this happened obviously after Russia invaded Ukraine and the United States weaponized the dollar, meaning that it was supposed to be a freedom of exchange, right? The United States is the richest country in the world because they are the reserve currency of the world. Countries like Argentina, Russia, and Zimbabwe weren't the reserve currency in the world, so they just started printing a bunch of it, right? The same idea, too many dollars, too much money drops the value of the money. Inflation, hyperinflation. That's why a lot of these countries are poor, because they stepped into that whole process of printing money. So big problem. I'll try to do the video. Let me guys, hit the like button, leave a comment, ask Marcello if you guys want me to do that video for you, but it's a really, really big problem. There was a little bit of news from the IRS this week, which I thought, outside of the 30,000 new agents that they're going to be hiring, there were some other news that I found extremely interesting, especially since this whole socialist idea is coming through the United States. Every year, I'm going to read this word for word. Every year, the IRS publishes a detailed report on the taxes that it collects, and the statistics are really interesting. The top 1% of U.S. taxpayers paid 48% of all U.S. income taxes. Top 10% paid nearly 72%. The bottom 40% paid nothing. So when we get this idea of the rich need to pay more, they're already paying 72% of all of the taxes. Like, I don't know if it's fair for them to be paying more. Let me know what you think about that. Overall, the markets, the U.S. markets were only the Dow was positive. The Dow went down by over 1%. The European markets were mostly mixed. In Latin America, we had my dear, beautiful Colombia went up over 3%, most positive of all. Africa and the Middle East was mostly mixed as well. And then in the far, far East, most of those markets were mixed as well. Big news in the Binance and the crypto space. Binance got sued by the CFTC, and there was $1.6 billion that was pulled out of Binance for that reason. If you do use Binance, probably should be a good idea to take it out. There's a company called Bybit, which is pretty good. Remember that all the videos that I do, it's for educational purposes only. I don't give trading advice. Binance also is struggling to find a bank to handle their clients' cash after the collapse of Signature Bank and also Silvergate Capital Corp. Remember that I mentioned to you guys in the recap that Barney, which was part of one of the senators during the 2008 financial crisis, he's on the board of this bank, Signature Bank, and he said that they were completely okay. They didn't need to be bailed out. So it seems to me that Silvergate was a bank that actually collapsed because of the exposure that they had to FTX, but Signature Bank, the government just used an excuse to close it. That way people couldn't, companies like Binance and other crypto companies couldn't find a bank to do their cash in because no other big banks actually do it. So now Binance is struggling to find a bank to do that, which means that it might be the end of crypto in the United States if they're not able to continue finding a resolution to that. Bitcoin is slightly lower for the week and went down 1.48%, just a touch over 28,000. In commodities, Walmart, which is the biggest retailer in the world, if I'm not mistaken, they're the biggest employer in the world as well. They're warning of higher prices due to inflation in 2023 and makes moves to lower the cost of things by 20%. They mentioning the V thing. If you haven't taken the V yet, or you're not going to take the boosters because you already took the other ones, they're planning on putting it in our food this month, the actual injections for the pandemic. I don't want to say the words, make sure I don't get banned. I got away with it once. I don't think I'll go with it twice. They're going to start putting these mRNA things in cows and the vaccines in cows and pigs. So if you don't like that, do your thing and do some research. Britons survive on eating expired food. A lot more Britons, due to the double digits winter inflation, are starting to eat food past their expiry date and also starting to stop taking so many medications, which isn't a bad thing. German supermarket prices have exploded 22.3% in March. Like, this is the kind of thing that we can see in the United States, for example, if the dollar collapses, because if everybody just is not going to accept the dollar anymore, then we're not going to be able to do business with anybody anymore. You see how that works? Can you imagine Like you go out and buy a dozen eggs. I don't know how much a dozen eggs cost nowadays, but let's say it's $5 or $6, and then the next month it's literally $7, just like that. Like every month it goes up $1 and then $10. Scary. Renewables surpass coal in U.S. electric generation. They now account for 20% of all electric generation, while natural gas is still the top one with 39%. That's good news. Oil surged as much as 8% after the oil mafia, OPEC, and also Russia announced that they were going to cut production, which is not something, for example, that Biden wanted. U.S. crude for the week went up over 6% to 80.70, while Brent went up over 6.50% to 85.12. China, there's also an interesting thing happening with gold and silver. You guys remember, if you guys are watching these videos regularly, how I was reporting how there's been a record demand for silver and gold, mostly gold, by the central banks. And I always tell you guys, don't pay attention to what they say, pay attention to what they do. Now, why would all of these countries all of a sudden want so much dollars? Well, now we have Texas and Tennessee getting into the fold as well. Tennessee is creating their state gold and silver reserve. They're passing a bill saying that Tennessee is going to be allowed to hold, sell, and also buy gold and silver. And Texas bill that was submitted both in the Senate and the House wants them to create a gold-backed digital currency. They already have a reserve of gold and silver, the Texas Mint, I believe it's called, not a mint, I can't remember the name exactly, but they already have their own, place where you can store it. But I thought that was really interesting. It's like, especially the countries, they want to stack up on as much gold as they can to have a bigger seat at the table when we hit the reset. Everything's fine. Nothing's going to happen. Don't worry. Gold is up over 1.8%. It went to 2007, while silver went up over 2.7% to 24.97. Financial and banking news: the failure of SFB, Silicon Valley Bank, is going to cost the FDIC $20 billion to insure all those deposits. The U.S. dollar is most likely going to start weakening against a lot of the other major currency this year. And the reason why is because now a lot of the other currencies are getting to the point where we have the same amount of interest rates as the U.S. dollar. Everybody was kind of plunging their dollars or throwing their money into dollars due to the fact that the U.S. was paying a lot better interest. And remember, a lot of these pensions and retirement funds and things like that always want to have a quote unquote secure investment. And states, since they never collapse, like Germany or the Roman Empire or the great United Kingdom, they could never possibly happen to the United States. Well, basically, they want to make sure that they have a fixed interest rate, because investing in things like a variable interest rate, like the stock market, is not a good investment because it's variable, which means it's risky. The Bank of England cleared the UBS buy of Credit Suisse, the $3.2 billion takeover for Credit Suisse. Only problem is that there needs to be another 58 countries that actually approve the deal. So obviously, it's always easy to get 58 countries to agree on the same thing. The inversion on the interest rates, the 10-year and the 2-year, accelerated, which means that we're definitely walking into a recession. And in political news, Trump went up to New York for his arraignment on the 34 felony counts of falsifying business records. He obviously pleaded not guilty. In the United States, a misdemeanor, which can be punishable by a year in prison, but if it's elevated to a felony, it's up to 4 years in prison when it's done in advance or concealed in another crime. So we'll see how that ends up as well. Economic news: the manufacturing activity in the United States got to its lowest level in the last 3 years. Remember, 3 years ago was the pandemic, so it's been the worst since the pandemic. New orders plunged, and analysts said that it could decline even further. So the economy, even though the jobs are great, there's other parts of the economy that aren't doing as well. Employers maintained a strong pace of hiring in March. Non-farm payrolls increased 236,000 in the month of March. That basically means that the economy is a little bit resilient if workers are continuing to find new jobs, right? If companies are giving new jobs to workers, and that could definitely give a sign to the central bank to raise interest rates even more, which could possibly be the last time that they raise interest rates this year. Corporate news: GM is looking to cut about $2 billion in costs. They gave buyouts to 5,000 of their workers instead of laying them off. UK is investing Amazon's anticipated takeover of the robot vacuum maker iRobot. the amazing robot that's going to sweep your house automatically and take pictures of you while you're sitting in the toilet and then post them to Facebook. Because that's what happened to a lady, and she never gave the robot permission to take pictures while she was on the toilet and upload them to Facebook. I wonder how that works. I thought that was so funny. It's so messed up too, but keep trusting AI, bro. Tesla cut U.S. prices 2% and 6%. Part of the reason why people are saying that they had record deliveries of over 422,000 cars. There's some cuts going on with the benefits now at the government. So now they're doing that to most likely help get cars out of the door. But a lot of analysts are saying that could hurt profitability. And Baidu, which is the Google of China, filed a lawsuit against relevant app developers and also the Apple App Store because they saw fake Ernie bots, which is their version of Chat GPT, their version of the AI in the App Store. Trade news, thousands of farmers are protesting in Romania after they dumped the cheap Ukrainian grain on them. If you guys remember, France also literally looks like a war zone. I mean, there's like fires everywhere. They walked into BlackRock's offices and set it on fire. It's absolutely horrible. There's protests everywhere. And no protests in Colombia. But Colombia is dangerous. Technology, recent Goldman Sachs study estimates that 2/3 of all jobs in Europe and the US could be affected by AI. And also the bank said that a calculated 7% of the workers may well lose their jobs. Global mergers and acquisitions volumes fell by 48% in Q1, according to Investment News. That means that a lot of people aren't moving as much money, which means that the economy isn't doing as well as previously thought. And a Tesla owner in California sued the electric car maker in a prospective class action lawsuit, accusing it of violating the privacy of its customers. Tesla would never do that. International events, Finland. I always say Canada instead of Canada. The Great Communist Republic of Canada. Finland. I always do these videos in Spanish. That's why if I stutter a little bit, you guys gotta bear with me. Finland becomes a member of NATO on Tuesday, completing a historic security change. Now that after the war, obviously with Ukraine and Russia, they're getting a little bit nervous. North Korea conducted another nuclear test of a capable underwater attack drone with nuclear weapons. Israel was attacked with 34 rockets from Lebanon, of which 25 were intercepted by their air defense systems. They sent rockets back as well. So look at how many things are starting to escalate around the world. And Brazil's government announced a return to the bloc in South America called UNASUR through presidential decree. And even China's getting into the mix, sending 71 planes and doing exercises a little close to comfort in Taiwan's airspace. And this was due to the fact that Taiwan's president, I'm not even going to try saying his name, met with the U.S. House Speaker representative. And in unusual facts this week, live births in Italy dropped 400,000 in 2022. Remember that Elon Musk said that the biggest danger to society is actually a population collapse. That's the news of this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget, the preppers were right.